Hello and welcome to the in-news series of Drishti IAS. I am Pooja, and in this segment today we are going to analyze, has India really emerged victorious in the 12th Ministerial Conference of World Trade Organization. It began on 12th of June and it has finally concluded with a certain key takeaways for our examination. From the perspective of prelims, this is very important that you know the facts, and from the perspective of mains examination, GS Mains Paper 3 is the main concern over here. Let's begin with the various topics that we are going to discuss under it. Now, here we will emphasize on, of course, WTO and its relationship with India, along with the detailed analysis of the highlights, what are the key takeaways in this historic agreement which has come after almost a decade, and impacts specifically from India's point of view, the conclusion, and in the last of the segment, I am going to ask you a mains-based question. Let us begin with the first topic, that is the news. Now, the Ministerial Conference, which is the highest decision-making body of World Trade Organization, has finally concluded. It has given certain spectacular wins for India. Now, what are these wins? What do we want to know is in the following segment. So first of all, let us know about World Trade Organization. It is the only global international organization which deals with the rules between trades of nations, trades between different nations, globalization, and WTO agreements negotiated and signed by bulk of the world's trading nations and ratified. That means legislation which was brought by their parliaments to bring into effect those negotiations. These are at the core or heart of World Trade Organization. It ensures that trade flows smoothly and seamlessly. Also, it settles trade disputes between its members, also supporting the need of the developing countries. Now, first of all, many of you must be thinking, what is developing country? What are developed countries? There is not any sort of list or any sort of definition that has been given by the World Trade Organization with respect to which are developing countries and which are developed countries. They can themselves claim so, and that is why these claims, if any country claims to be a developing country, certain falls into a dispute between the developed countries, because there are certain exemptions or discounts that are given to developing countries so that they have competitive advantage over the developed countries. Let us move on and talk about all major decisions that are made by the WTO member governments. It is either by ministers who actually meet at least every 2 years. Now, the ministerial conference is always happening in Geneva, and that is in Switzerland, and ambassadors or delegates also meet at Geneva, that is regularly. They can meet at a regular basis because trade is a regular action, right? Moving on, the WTO's, which is the top decision-making body, is the Ministerial Conference. Next Ministerial Conference is the Ministerial Conference 13. This was the 12th one. General Council and various other councils are subordinate to it. There are 160 plus members. Why am I saying 160 plus members? Because it's not really clear. The source that I have cited here is WTO's authentic website. Some places I saw it was shown 163 or 164, so I wrote 160 plus. If you have proper number, you can comment. Annual budget is done by the contributions of the members. Each member's share of international trade is calculated for making sure that they are properly contributing to the budget of World Trade Organization. Moving on, if we talk about the Director General, the 7th Director General, the first African and the first woman to become the Director General of WTO is Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She has been into the office since 2021 to 2025 is her tenure. Okay, moving on, I want to ask you a question that is a very, you can say a very interactive question. Can you please name this building? This is the building of the WTO in the comment segment. Whoever is going to answer it, I'm going to take their names. Moving on, if we talk about certain important terms and you can say mechanisms which are related with WTO. First is the reduction of tariff and non-trade, non-tariff barriers. This takes into account the agreement which proposes an overall reduction in tariffs on manufactured products so that trade can be done of manufactured products very smoothly, and Also phasing out the quantitative restriction over a period of time. That means a country can have a barrier with respect to the quantity of manufactured goods that can be imported from another country. So this is the first. Trade related investment measures, that is TRIMS. This is an agreement that forbids the host country, supposedly India, to discriminate against investment from abroad vis-a-vis domestic investment. That means the foreign investment which has been done in India should not be discriminated against the domestic investments which have been done in India. So here it takes into its hands the seamless flow of foreign investment, giving rise to trade, employment opportunities, raising the standard of living. The trade related intellectual property rights. Now this takes into account protecting the rights of the inventors who are inventing some things like COVID-19 vaccine, and protecting their interest with respect to their intelligence. Because if I am producing something in which I have invested a lot of time, energy, amount, then that is and it has been very beneficial to the globe as a whole, I have a right over it. It can take into account patent, copywriting, everything. So TRIPS is intellectual property rights. It seeks to protect and provide legal recognition to the creator of the intangible illegal use of his creation. Okay, and this has been at the heart of negotiations with respect to COVID-19 vaccine. Okay, and it can take into account patents, copyrights, geographical indication, trademarks, industrial circuits, designs, and trade secrets. India has also come up with various legislations to ensure that TRIMS is enforced into its own country very efficiently. Also, agreement on agriculture, it deals with giving market access and reducing export subsidies and government subsidies on agriculture produce. If a government provides constant subsidies, it gives the products a competitive edge over in the world over other products. So this is also something that India was actually struggling with a lot. There is not a perfect conclusion to it. It can move on for years. Agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures, it restricts exports of any country that do not comply with the international standards of germs and bacteria. That can this pertains to marine industry, food processing industry. Okay, let's move on and talk about our next topic, that is WTO and India. WTO and India are India has been a part of it since 1995. Before that, the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trades. This is the forerunner of WTO. India was a part of that as well. So at Doha World Trade Organization conference which took place, India there emerged as a leader of the developing and least developed countries. From there, it gained its significance very well, and the meeting was declared a success because the delegates of 142 countries, they agreed to have a new round of conference with respect to environment, competition, and investment. Okay, let's move on and talk about the next thing here. The most important is the highlights. Now, highlights of this particular agreement, it is being seen historic because on most of the topics, majority of the WTO members, they agreed, and this is why this particular conclusion of the agreement, conclusion of the ministerial conference is very historic. First is an outcome document. Just have a look through it. I am going to discuss it in detail in the upcoming time. A package on WTO responses to emergencies, which comprises a ministerial declaration, has been adopted on the emergency response to food insecurity. Now, this takes into account restrictions that have been removed by the WTO with respect to export of public stock holding by different governments. First that, and for another reason, this particular move is very important. Why? Because world right now is seeing a spike in food prices because of COVID-19 and of course Russia-Ukraine war. Ministerial declaration on World Food Program, food purchases, exemptions from export prohibition or restriction. In order to ensure that food security sustains itself, World Food Program, there is a ministerial declaration on World Food Program so that it can be exempted from any sort of barriers of exports and imports. World Food Program was established in 1961 at Rome, Italy, and it is a United Nations food assistance program, biggest food assistance program, humanitarian program. Ministerial declaration on the WTO response to the COVID-19 pandemic and preparedness for the future pandemics also. Ministerial declaration on the agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. Also, there has been a decision on the e-commerce moratorium and work program. This is the most important thing that we are going to discuss. Fisheries subsidy. There has been an agreement on fisheries subsidy. This problem was there since 2001. There was no agreement with respect to subsidies should be provided to fishermen or not, specifically those who are over exploiting the region. This is something that we are going to discuss in detail because it's very important for India. The World Work Program on Small Economies, TRIPS, Non-Violation and Situation Complaints, and a Sanitary and Phytosanitary Declaration for 12th WTO Ministerial Conference responding to modern challenges. Now, what is the outcome document saying? Now, this outcome document is very, very important because this has come into the picture after a very long time, and it reaffirms the principles and objectives which are set in the Marrakesh Agreement. Do Google about Marrakesh Agreement, because if I am going to teach everything in detail, it will go on for 1 or 2 hours that I can't afford. So, reaffirms the provision of special and differential treatment for developing country members and LDCs as an integral part of its agreement. It still says that we cannot, discount the needs of the LDCs, least developed countries and developing countries, because of the developed countries. So, there was a differential treatment. A fully and well-functioning dispute settlement system is to be made possible by 2024, and a new accession, no new membership has taken place since 2016. Many members are keen to join WTO. That has also been acknowledged in the particular outcome document. Now, some other things that we have to know: trade and health. Members agree on a COVID-19 global response. There should be a global response, seamless transfer of technology, seamless transfer of vaccines, and it should be made available to the marginalized countries. A framework to render WTO more resilient and better prepared for future pandemics. So, patent waiver has been done away with, but it has not yet been officialized because we are waiting for the US to have an official statement for it. Moving on, if we talk about agriculture, draft ministerial declaration which is on the emergency response to food insecurity. Ministerial decision to exempt food purchased by the UN's World Food Program for humanitarian purposes from any export restriction. There will be no export restriction with respect to World Food Program if it procures and wants to export into different countries. This is also something very historic. Also, there is a positive role has been reiterated for the agriculture market information system, which provides seamless information flow between the countries with respect to agriculture information. E-commerce, WTO members agreed to maintain the current practice of not imposing custom duties on electronic transmission until Ministerial Conference 13. That is by 31st December 2023 for India. 31st December 2023. Now, if Ministerial Conference for some reason or the other cannot happen in 2023, if it goes on for 2024, then this particular exemption will be expiring on the particular date of 31st December. Now, ministerial decision on World Food Program food purchases exemption from export prohibition or restriction. Now, in view of the critical humanitarian support that is provided by the World Food Program, with the understanding, decision has been made that members shall not impose any export prohibition or restriction on foodstuffs that are purchased for non-commercial humanitarian purpose by World Food Program. Moving on, if we talk about fishery subsidy, this is something that was wanting to happen since 2001 because illegal fishing has risen, and because of that over exploitation has risen. So government subsidies, if they are providing so many subsidies, so many monetary help to the local population, they will tend to over exploit that. So government subsidies help drive illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing that contributes to overfishing and depletion of fish stocks. Now, according to OECD, it is said that global annual fish consumption is expected to grow 16.3% between 20 and 2029. And according to United Nations, 52% of the fish stock it monitors are fully exploited and 17% are overexploited. If this trend goes on and on, the fishery sector will be very unsustainable in nature. China stands at the top when it comes to providing fishery subsidy. This is from 2018. You see China 5.9 billion, then comes Japan, European Union. This country was outrightly, this association or union was outrightly talked about by India at the WTO, that EU has a lot of fish, it overexploits its own fisheries, and does not leave anything for least developed countries that are surrounding its region, and they do not report it. Also, South Korea, Russia, US, Thailand and Taiwan fall into the same category. Moving on, if we talk about the subsidy globally, it is 35 billion annually, and $20 billion subsidy effectively enhances the capacity of large fishing fleets. Okay, so this is one of the reasons. Now for India, it was a challenge. We talk about fishery sector in India. Fishery sector in India is basically supporting 28 million people, and 22 million metric ton is the export aspiration of India for 24-25. This was something that India was targeting. So the agreement, what does it say? It prohibits subsidies for vessels and operators which are engaged in illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. It also establishes new rules for subsidies for the fishing stocks that are already overexploited, prohibits subsidies to fishing of stocks on the high seas that are not managed by regional bodies. Regional bodies, if they are not managing any area, then prohibition of subsidies is going to be taking place. Treaty contains certain flexibility for developing country. Here India comes into the picture, known as special and differential treatment. That means certain discounts and exemptions have been given. Moving on, for India, first point was that US technology companies made profits at the expense of emerging market business. So if US technology companies are investing in a country, earning from it, but they're not paying taxes, they are paying taxes at some tax havens and in the US, then what happens? Although India is giving a lot of market to such a technology company, but if they are not getting any return, then that's a problem. European trawlers were targeted for overfishing and harming small fishers in developing nations. Lifting a rule restriction exports of subsidized food items for government emergency stockpiles is of utmost importance for India. So India wanted that it could export its food stockpiles, because right now a lot of neighboring countries want support from India because they want to have an edge over China. So for that also India was eyeing this, and these were the main problems that India flagged. Okay, moving on, if we talk about India defended its right to extend subsidies to its fishermen, which it actually got. India agreed to an 18-month extension for the moratorium on custom duty on electronic imports that we have already discussed. And the deal on patent waiver or COVID-19 vaccines, it will allow India and other eligible developing countries to manufacture and export vaccines. Now, if they are patented, India would have to first of all ask the original inventor or creator of that vaccine to produce and manufacture and export. Now that is gone. India agreed to extend the moratorium on custom duty on digital imports that we have talked about, and India has agreed to do away, this is not S, this is do away, with export restrictions on procurement by the UN World Food Programme. So India can provide food grains to World Food Programme as well, but it has done that on a condition that India will do so only if the domestic needs of the country is met. Okay, let's move on and talk about New India at WTO. First, what is the big win for fishermen? First, no restriction on subsidies for fishing within India's exclusive economic zone. India can provide subsidies for fishermen who are fishing within EEZ, and that is 200 nautical miles, in which India will have the sovereign rights for fishing, drilling and also producing energy from wind and water. And no restriction on subsidies for fishing in regional fisheries Management Organization area. These are those areas, basically Regional Fishery Management Organization, it acknowledges the high sea fishing. Okay, so if it is acknowledging India's rights in high sea fishing, then India will, there can be no restriction on subsidies. India will provide subsidies, and there will also be a check and control on illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, especially by fishing giants like China and European Union. What is the big win with respect to health? India TRIPS proposal on vaccines accepted, in which back in 2020, India along with South Africa went to the WTO and said that we want patent waiver when it comes to vaccine export, manufacture, production, because vaccine is something that was the need of the global hour and not something that only India wanted for itself. So India first got that. It can produce patented vaccine for domestic use and also export. So that's very good. Poor nations also will gain access to vaccination at affordable cost. Vaccine Maitri was one of the vaccine diplomacy that India undertook. India's concern for diagnostics and therapeutics that will be addressed in the upcoming 6 months. So these are certain very important points. Another thing is that India becomes the voice for poor and vulnerable, that is the developing and least developed countries, because there was an outcome document that came at the fore. Since there was no outcome document since 2015, India's stand becomes global stand. India leads in putting faith back in multilateralism. Why? Because when Piyush Goyal was trying to push the deal in a sense that it not only favors India but all other countries as well, he managed to do a lot of bilateral meetings. He managed to do a lot of small group meetings in order to ensure that they are on the same page. So one thing also that I missed is WTO has also accepted that there should be a structural change in WTO so that least developed countries and developing countries are on the same page and at the par with respect to their voices with the developed countries. Moving on, now there is one tweet that I noticed. Here it says the Moni's decision right at the close of Ministerial Conference 12. It is not an intellectual property waiver. It says it does nothing more than add relaxation of constraints. Constraints have become less on exports, while adding there should be more requirements to the use of already established flexibilities. Okay, constraints have lessened and flexibilities increased, such as compulsory licensing, and the adoption of such a text constitutes a step backwards for the protection and promotion of public health, not only during the pandemic but health emergencies others as well. Also proceeding in another international forums like WHO. It is saying that it's not an actual intellectual property waiver, but it is something that has lessened the constraint. The majority of the innovators will still actually reinforce their creative patent that they are already having the power to. Okay, so this is something that IHA said, and let us look at our question. So discuss how India emerged as the voice of the marginalized at MC12 of World Trade Organization 250. Okay, so do this question, answer my prelims question. That's it for today. Next time we shall meet again with another segment. Until then, stay updated. Thank you so much for watching.